there's so much money in that, and there's so much money in fentanyl, and there still is money in weed for the cartels, not as much. They're still involved in it. The public land stuff, fortunately, has started to slow down. We're not seeing these grows, deep in national forests like we would see in the Lolo or the Kootenai, where we're at now, or that I would see in the foothills of Santa Cruz County, right between us where we grew up back in the old home state of California. They still are out there to an extent. They're still, decimating every creek that they put a grow on because of the EPA ban poisons and toxics, which we will go over more of. But now they're going to private land, and they're going to rural tracts in plain sight because of poor regulation structures. And I'll use California as an example. And, when you look at California, both you're in my old home state, you look at the amount of wildlife that's in it, the amount of resources, and the amount of pristine areas that are surprisingly left with how populated that state has become. But there's a lot of beauty in that state. There's a lot of pristine water. There's migrating steelhead trout that come up from the ocean and, spawn and lay their eggs and get those fish going in small amounts in Santa Cruz, Santa Clara County, all up and down the coastline. Tons of deer, elk, pronghorn, you name it, hogs, turkeys. All of these wildlife species are being, really, really impacted negatively by any of these illegal grow sites, cartel or not, that are doing them by stealing water. They're putting EPA banned poisons all over the plants and in the waterways to keep everything off that cash crop. And now with it a misdemeanor to grow illegally over 7 plants and an infraction for a juvenile. And we need to point out to, our viewers and listeners that of many, many cartel operations that we would do takedowns and do spec ops on. And, we're going up against guns. We were in six gun fights before I retired, canines being stabbed, a lot of hand-to-hand takedowns, a lot of weapons being taken off guys that didn't want to give up. And when you're in that environment all the time, and these guys are going to defend these grow sites because of the money involved, because of their bosses, the public can run across that. There's obviously dangers there. We can encounter danger as law enforcement officers. And what they're doing besides the cash crop with all the poisons is just mind-blowing. Like a tablespoon or two of carbofuran, metaphos, Q-furan, these are just trade names, of a nerve agent insecticide that was banned by the EPA in America over 20 years ago because the EPA learned with their study data that, hey, this was developed for keeping stuff off agriculture, what our crops that we're eating. And even with a 12-ounce bottle of this crystalline powder of metaphos or carbofuran, dumped into 6,000 gallons of water as it was prescribed and put all over our crops, that was considered too toxic. And these cartels have backpack sprayers, Andy, of 5-6 gallons maybe, and they're dumping half a bottle of that stuff in there, and they're spraying this stuff undiluted all over everything, exposing anyone that goes into contact in that grow site. And that's not only in the outdoor pristine grows we're talking about in the deep woods, this is in the private land grows now too. And because we regulated and went to misdemeanor when Prop 64 in Cali, as an example, regulated cannabis recreationally, we could have done it so much better if we were going to regulate. We could have kept the felony. We could have kept the hard penalties for illegal growing, whether it was public land, private land, environmental, damage, things like that. But we basically incentivized the cartels. We incentivized the black market. And one of the jobs I had as being the lieutenant and the team leader of the marijuana enforcement team, our first tactical unit developed in 2013, as you know, just to fight this problem.